President-elect of Honduras, Xiomara Castro, will announce the members of her future cabinet. Russian government spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has blamed the West for tensions in Eastern Europe and stressed that it's using a phantom threat to supply arms to Ukraine. Lebanon signed an agreement with Jordan on Wednesday to import electricity using Syria as a conduit. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. This Wednesday, the President-elect of Honduras, Xiomara Castro, will announce the members of her future cabinet. According to Pedro Barquero, the member of that commission and one of the favorites for the position of Minister of the Presidency, the head of state will also share information about the new governmental structure. Castro will take office next Thursday with strong international support, headed by the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, who will attend his inauguration, as well as her Argentinian counterpart, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, the President-elect of Chile, Gabriel Boric, former President of Brazil, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, and the former President of Bolivia, Evo Morales. On Tuesday, Haiti's Prime Minister Ariel Henry warned that the country cannot wait any longer and called for new elections. According to Henry, in his social networks, it is necessary to change the political situation of the nation in order to return to democratic order, which he considers essential. He also acknowledged the importance of handing over the reins of the country to a president elected by the majorities. The president announced less than a week ago that he will remain in office until new elections were held, thus rejecting the claims of some political platforms demanding his departure on February 7th. Now we move on to other topics. Almost 900 people were evacuated from the tourist town serving Machu Picchu, the Inca jewel of Peru's travel industry, amid rains and floods that left one person missing and several homes destroyed. The Ministry of Tourism said in a statement that 880 tourists were stranded by the overflow of the Alcamayo River, were transferred from Machu Picchu to Ollantaya, another nearby tourist town. One person was reported hurt and another missing, and several buildings as well as the rail wall suffered structural damage due to the rising waters. Due to the damage to the track caused by the rains, the rail link was already slated to be suspended for tourist services until January 27th. Nearly 500,000 people visited the Inca ruins in 2021, a figure far below the 1.5 million visitors it used to attract before the COVID-19 pandemic.
We asked the regional government and the national government to help us with this project to rebuild Machu Picchu town, because it affects us when Machu Picchu is closed, because not only one region lives off tourism, but there are many other regions, the capital of Peru as well, the hotels and restaurants that are in the region of Cusco and in the capital and other cities. When Machu Picchu is closed, it has an unfortunate repercussion on the economy and on the tourist sector.
In the United States, a wildfire that erupted last week amid strong winds in Rouge Mountains near California's Big Sur coast destroyed more than 400 hectares. Named the Colorado Fire for its starting point in Palo Colorado Canyon, the blaze triggered evacuation orders for about 500 people in the lightly populated area, about 160 kilometers south of San Francisco. The fire's cause remained under investigation. Forecasters predicted the San Francisco Bay region will be dry and mild this week, while Southern California will experience another round of gusty Santa Ana winds. In Turkey, 24 hours after all flights were suspended at Istanbul airport amid heavy snowfall, a gradual restart of flights kicked off. Flights were suspended for safety reasons after the roof of a cargo facility at the airport collapsed from the weight of snow. Officials have said the snowfall around Istanbul will continue until Thursday and urge the people not to venture out in private cars unless necessary. According to the company that operates the busiest airport in Europe, said 2 runways were open and work was underway to reopen the 3rd runway for flights. It also announced that shuttle services to and from the airport were regularly operated in the city. Passengers were advised to check their flight status before going to the airport. Thailand's Navy battled on Wednesday to control an oil spill which leaked from a pipeline in waters off the country's east coast. Officials said up to 160,000 liters of crude oil had been spilled into the Gulf of Thailand off Rayong province late on Tuesday. The Navy sent a surveillance plane, 2 ships and a helicopter to help with the cleanup. Authorities said the helicopter surveyed the area and sprayed a chemical to help disperse all the oil slick. A senior pollution control official said the spill is near an industrial area, but some of the oil could hit area beaches by Friday if it's not dispersed before then. It estimated about 20,000 liters of oil was floating on the surface. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back. 12 different states from different regions of the world are evaluated at the 40th session of the Universal Periodic Review at the UN Human Rights Council. Today, it was the time for Iceland and Venezuela.
The United Nations headquarters in Geneva today hosted the Universal Periodic Review of Human Rights in Venezuela. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez opened the session by denouncing the compliance of some member states with the sanctions, which she described as illegitimate. Venezuela undertook its 3rd Universal Periodic Review, not without its difficulties because we have gone through failed attempts of assassinations, mercenary invasions, sabotage to our vital infrastructure, economic warfare in full expansion of coercive and unilateral measures that behave as real weapons of mass destruction, harmful, systematic and generally affecting the full enjoyment of human rights by the Venezuelan people. Following the report submitted by Venezuela, more than 100 countries have intervened to offer recommendations for the promotion of human rights in the country. Many of them have denounced the punitive measures applied against Venezuela.
We recommend to continue the battle against inequality and poverty, maintaining efforts to subsidize public services targeted by illegal, coercive and unilateral measures imposed by foreign governments.
We recommend the government of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela to improve the economic well-being of its people. Despite the harsh economic situation, we condemn the use of coercive and unilateral measures against the country.
To oppose unilateral coercive measures to pressure Venezuelan leaders, we want to see a resolution of differences by the citizens themselves. Without external interference, we recommend continuing to cooperate with the special procedures of the Council.
In her speech, the Venezuelan Vice President questioned the role of the UN Human Rights Council in relation to the North-South gap. This council must reflect the human rights system must put itself at the service of the peoples, to put an end to imbalances and inequalities. In addition to the report submitted by Venezuela, the reviews evaluates the report of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights and the report of independent bodies managed by the Council. The outcome of the review will be included in a final report containing the recommendations of the various states of the United Nations, which Venezuela will have to implement in view of the next assessment to happen in the next 5 years.
Now we move on to other topics. In Russia, Kremlin says the West is using a phantom threat to supply arms to Ukraine. Russian government spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has blamed the West for tension in Eastern Europe and stressed that it's using a phantom threat to supply arms to Ukraine. Against the backdrop of an artificial and phantom threat allegedly emanating from Russia, Western countries continue to flood Ukraine with weapons, provide its military advisors, and in general accuse Ukrainian provocations instead of making them implement the Minsk agreements approved by the UN Security Council, Peskov denounced, as reported by the Russian TASS agency. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned in an address to lawmakers that Moscow will take necessary retaliatory measures if it didn't receive constructive responses and if the West continued its aggressive policy.
If a constructive response does not arrive and the West continues its aggressive course, Moscow will, as President Vladimir Putin has said on more than one occasion, take the necessary retaliatory measures. The security of Russia and its citizens is an unconditional priority, and it will be reliable and ensured in all circumstances.
Russian Federation Council Speaker Valentina Matvienko accused Ukraine of harboring plans to retake territories by force on Wednesday. The government officials said that Kiev was planning various false flag operations under the guidance of their Western masters in order to blame it on Russia. Matvienko used Western shipments of military aid to Ukraine as evidence and also as an instance to back their claims. Pope Francis made an appearance where he called for peace in Ukraine, preaching for stability in the region.
I invite you to pray for peace in Ukraine. I invite you to do so often during this day. Let us ask the Lord insistently that this land may see brotherhood again, overcoming wounds, fears, divisions. We have spoken about the Holocaust. Think that more than 5 million people were annihilated during the last World War. They are people who suffer a lot, who suffer hunger, who suffer so much cruelty, and they deserve peace. Let the prayers and evocations that rise today to heaven touch the minds and hearts of leaders on earth, so that they make dialogue prevail and the good of all be placed before partisan interest. Please, never war.
3 people were injured and several buildings were extensively damaged by an explosion in Athens, Greece, early on Wednesday that sparked a fire and wrecked building fronts along a major street in the city center. According to Greek public broadcaster, the explosion occurred in a building on the area's Singru Avenue, one of the city's main arteries. The head of workers at the National Center for Emergency Care said a 77-year-old man sustained severe burns to his arms and also his legs, and as a result of the explosion, and was rushed to the hospital. Officials stated that so far at least 3 people have been confirmed injured during the blast. Police have launched We confirm, police have launched an investigation determining the cause of the explosion.
The taxi was pushed 2 lanes across from the explosion. There wasn't any other vehicles close by for something to happen. I wasn't hurt. Everything is fine. Whatever happened was from the outside.
And Beijing rejected the U.S. plan to intervene in the semiconductor chip market to prevent China's growth in this sector. The rejection of the action, considered an interference, comes after the presentation of a bill in the U.S. House of Representatives for a rule to increase U.S. competitiveness in this sector. The measure establishes subsidies for U.S. companies and also tries to impose a national supply chain, leaving out actors such as Russia and China. For his part, the President of the United States, Joe Biden, stated that the measure aims to win the competition with China and the rest of the world for decades. China and the 5 Central Asian countries of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan have agreed to expand practical cooperation in various fields, including trade, security and people-to-people exchanges, said a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson on Wednesday.
They are determined to deepen security cooperation. All parties agreed to continue cooperation in combating the 3 forces of terrorism, separatism and extremism, and jointly safeguard the political security and regional peace and stability. They agreed to deepen vaccine and health cooperation. President Xi announced an additional aid of 50 million doses of vaccines to Central Asian countries to help them build an immunity barrier. Fifth, they stressed the importance of promoting cultural and people-to-people cooperation. President Xi announced that China will provide 1,200 government scholarships to the 5 Central Asian countries in the next 5 years, strive to bring the number of sister cities with the 5 countries to 100 pairs in the next 5 to 10 years, and stands ready to make all 5 Central Asian countries approved destinations for Chinese tourists.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. Lebanon signed an agreement with Jordan on Wednesday to import electricity using Syria as a conduit. Amid a multidimensional crisis, Lebanon sought out to his neighbors, aiming to reduce its struggles with energy production. Lebanon's energy minister, Walid Fayyad, signed the agreement with his Jordanian and Syrian counterparts, saying of the occasion that it was an important event, not because of the impact, but because of the symbolism, as the Lebanese people will appreciate every bit of energy available, and regional cooperation brings new light to a geopolitical context troubled by war and also foreign intervention for many years. This is one step oriented towards the power sector reform, one of the main conditions set by the international creditors for disbursing billions of dollars to stimulate the broken down Lebanese economy.
This is an important historic moment for Lebanon and hopefully for the whole Arab world, not because of its impact but because of its symbolism. We hope to reinforce cooperation and cohesion between Arab countries in terms of economic and social work through this agreement, which is a modest but very important agreement for the Lebanese people who need every extra hour of electricity. We complete the works within the specified period and we are ready to connect to the power grid at any time. All the works that we pledged to accomplish have been completed.
Palestinians suffered daily aggressions by the Israeli settlers in the village of Burqa, located in the occupied West Bank. After injuring nearly 100 Palestinians at the beginning of the month, settler attacks continue unabated. The attacks are taking place despite the fact that Israel dismantled the settlement in 2005 as part of its withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, and the law prohibits Israeli citizens from entering the area. Such is the case of Galid Hayach, born and raised in the village of Burqa, who was one of the targets of a settlers' drone attack this month.
I was sitting on the balcony and suddenly I heard a sound like bombs exploding inside the house. It was a terrifying thing. When I tried to enter the house, the stones were all over the bedroom and the living room, where I could not enter because the stones were falling from all directions. I felt like I was in the middle of a bombing in Lebanon. I hid inside like a thief in my own house.
And both these Palestinian citizens and other residents said that settlers have attacked the village on more than a dozen occasions in recent years, and that the Israeli army makes no effort to stop them.
The main road is always dangerous, as settlers always come to block the road and they attack the citizens. We have suffered from this for a long time, and this is not the first time. Before you leave your house, you have to see whether there are settlers outside or not.
Afghan women rallied in Kabul on Wednesday in a Taliban-sanctioned protest endorsing their regime and calling on the West to unfreeze the nation's assets as its humanitarian crisis deepens. Protesters carried banners calling on Washington to open access to $9.5 billion in Afghanistan's central bank assets, which it froze when the Taliban seized power following a hasty withdrawal of United States-led forces last year. Wednesday's demonstration was held the day after a Taliban delegation wrapped up a landmark visit to Norway, seeking aid to tackle the humanitarian crisis. Since they returned to office, foreign aid representing about 80% of the country's budget stopped overnight, and more than half of the population is facing hunger this winter.
Our protest is to show our support for the Islamic Emirate. We, the Afghan women, declare our support. We also demand that the money that the U.S. has frozen be unfrozen, as that is the right of the oppressed Afghan people.
Now we move on to other topics. China placed a new satellite after launching a Long March 4C rocket on Wednesday. The rocket blasted off the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center in the country's northwest and sent the TeleSUR-01A capsule into orbit. The prototype is equipped with a radar that will be used to monitor the geological environment, landslides and earthquakes. This is the first of two satellites that are designed to be put into orbit at an altitude of 600 kilometers. The second TeleSUR-01 being scheduled to be launched at the end of February. The director of the UAV Technology Joint Laboratory of Jiuquan Center said the teams are focused on solving the tactical problems as they prepare for future missions with every time more achievements in research and innovation.
We handled space station missions and satellite missions simultaneously last year. Faced with a multitude of launch missions and higher requirements, we spared no efforts to tackle key problems, carried out research and development for information technologies. We improved the equipment automation, optimized personnel allocation, and the test and launch mode. We have developed a workflow suitable for our launch center. All research topics in our lab are aimed at the actual needs of space launch, search and rescue. We focus on solving practical problems and prepare for missions in the future.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.